right, so going back to our article on home equity lines of credit, or I should say reverse mortgage lines of credit, and looking at the retiree number one, the mass affluent retiree. Again, the mass affluent has $400,000 of home equity and $800,000 of retirement savings. Retirement savings, of course, would be IRAs, 401ks, and whatnot. Retiree number one, the typical mass affluent retiree, has been defined as it discussed in existing literature. Sachs and Sachs in 2012 consider it a mass affluent with $417,000 home value at the outset of retirement and a portfolio of $800,000. Similarly, Salter, Pfeiffer, and Avensky considered a retiree of the home value of $250,000 and a portfolio savings of $500,000. Although these figures place a hypothetical retiree at the low end of the mass affluent range, the ratio of home value to retirement savings is 1 to 2. Again, but we are going to use a different almost affluent retiree. So basically, Avensky and Salter, and then going back to Sachs and Sachs, they have two different scenarios. But either way, they got a 1 to 2 home equity to retirement savings ratio, if that will. Okay. With the possible, FAO reviewed a series of previous papers and the respective algorithms, considering a retiree with a home value of $500,000 and a $1 million retirement portfolio, again, replicating the 1 to 2 ratio, with a possible exception of certain areas on the West Coast and the Northeast where home values have climbed to extraordinary heights. These values likely would be typical of a mass affluent retiree. The results of this study indicate that in the typical case of the results of this study indicate that in the case of the typical mass affluent retiree, the probability of cash flow survival over a 30-year retirement would be at least 90%, with an initial withdrawal rate of approximately 5% of the portfolio's initial value. Okay, so we're shooting for a 90% success rate where they don't run out of liquid net worth, and we're taking 5% of the portfolio initially. Thus, using the reverse mortgage credit line in either the simple algorithm referred to as coordinated strategy, suggested by Sachs and Sachs, or the more complex algorithm referred to as standby line of credit, suggested by Pfeiffer, Salter, and Avensky, we'll get into that, increased the initial withdrawal rate that had approximately a 90% probability of 30-year cash flow survival from Bengen's 4% rule with no use of home equity. So again, we're going from 4 to 5%. That's a 25% increase in your ability to take money out of your overall net worth as opposed to just liquid net worth, and yet you still maintain a 90% survival rate. By contrast, if the reverse mortgage was used only as a last resort and not in either of these algorithms, the increased and effective safe withdrawal rate was negligible. Therefore, the typical mass retiree, the reverse mortgage credit line used in either algorithm resulted in a 25% increase in the retiree's inflation-adjusted retirement income throughout his 30-year retirement. A question that arises, and one that is explored for the remainder of this paper, is how and to what extent is the retirement income of the other three representative retirees affected by the use of one of those algorithm strategies? We'll get into that. All right, so retiree number two, the house-rich mass affluent retiree. And this person has $800,000 in home equity and $400,000 in portfolio value. Now, I just got to reiterate, home equity is the same as the fair market value of the home. None of these people have debt at all. That's a different topic for a different day, and I've done topics on that before. In this case, they have no debt. So $800,000 home equity is the exact same thing as $800,000 as their value of their home. This representative has a ratio of 2 to 1. So $2 in home equity for every $1 in portfolio assets. For this retiree, his or home value is substantially greater than the value of his retirement savings. Such a situation may have arisen because the retiree lives in a part of the country where exceptional increases in home value have occurred, or perhaps because of life choices resulting in buying a larger home at the expense of reduced retirement savings. Yep. The representative retiree does not appear to have been considered in any detail in the financial planning literature from previous studies. Therefore, the situation of this type of retiree is examined in quantitative detail in later sections of this paper. Retiree number three, the almost affluent retiree. Retiree number three is one who has a home value of $150,000 and $300,000 in portfolio. This representative retiree is not quite affluent, having total retirement income resources of $450,000. Moreover, it follows from table 1 that this retiree is not quite typical because he or she has retirement savings greater than his home value, whereas a table and other data indicate that most retirees, especially those with retirement income resources in the middle of the economic spectrum, have retirement savings that are less than the home value. I'm telling you, that is most retirees, especially those in the mid-range of retirement planning in terms of assets, have retirement savings that are less than their home values, which is why not looking at reverse mortgages boggles the mind. It is worth noting and relevant to the calculations set out in the later portion of this paper that the ratio of home value to retirement savings 1 to 2 is the same for the retirees as the before, where we did $400,000 in home and $800,000 retirement savings. Finally, retiree number 4, the house-rich, almost affluent retiree has $300,000 of home value and $150,000 of retirement portfolio. Okay, so that's a 2-to-1 ratio. All right, so we got, again, we just went through those 4 scenarios. Let's keep going because it's important. All right, assumptions and background. Retirees have several major economic concerns, most notably 1, inflation-adjusted cash flow, survival through retirement. Number 2, additional cash availability in the event of an emergency or an unanticipated need. And number 3, legacy. Cash flow. Cash flow survival is defined here as a 90% or greater probability that cash flow to the retiree will continue for at least 30 years following the outset of retirement. The measure of cash flow itself is expressed in terms of an initial withdrawal rate. Typically, this rate has been defined as a percentage of the value of the retirement savings at the outset of retirement, the 4% rule. Fowle examined several more nuanced approaches to the 4% rule, in which he said it might be too high or too low. Other people have as well. Some say 3.2, some say 5. I default to 5, but still, at the end of the day, 4% rule is a good starting point. The results presented here express the initial distribution rate in the traditional way so that comparisons can be made to the 4% rule. But these results also indicating that expressing the initial withdrawal rate as a fraction of total retirement income resources may be more useful and more broadly applicable. As shown below, in the context of investment returns consistent with historical averages, a rule of 30 where the initial distribution rate is 1/30 of the total retirement income sources, including home value, provides a more stable and consistent retirement income strategy across various assets classes of retirees. So rule of 30. So we have $30 in total assets, and we take $1 of that out. That right there is 1/30, which means it gives us a total retirement income which provides more stable and consistent retirement income strategy with less likelihood of running out of money, by the way. The reverse mortgage growing line of credit. Also important to the analysis is the growing line of credit. A majority of the roughly 1 million reverse mortgage loans currently outstanding are home equity conversion mortgages. A unique feature of that is that when some or all the loan proceeds are taken in form of the line of credit, the amount available to be taken continues to grow over time. After the credit line is established, the amount available to take in grows at the same rate as the interest applicable to the amount that is actually taken. The amount available when a reverse mortgage is established depends on the age of the borrower at the time and is greater for the older borrower than for a younger. However, the increment as a function of age is substantially smaller than the increment that results from these early established, followed by the increase resulting from the application of interest rates. I talked a lot about that. So a lot of people say, I'm not going to take a reverse mortgage till I get older. I guess fear of the expenses or something like that. And that's not the way to go. You want to take the reverse mortgage on the front end to get that compounding growth, the line of credit that grows and grows and grows. The longer you wait, yes, you'll get more on the front end relative to what you could at 62. So if you're 80, you'll get more relative to what you could at 62. But if you're 80 and just doing your home equity line of credit at that point, what you could have got at 62 will probably dwarf what you could get at 80. And I did other videos on that. So just make sure you type in my playlist on reverse mortgages. The effect of the home equity reverse mortgage interest-based increase in the amount available is important in enabling a retiree to have cash available throughout the 30-year retirement. Moreover, at this time, reverse mortgages other than home equity conversion mortgages are not available as credit lines. So that's all we got. I'm just using reverse mortgage and home equity conversion mortgage intertwined as the same thing, synonymously. Another important aspect of the reverse mortgage is a non-recourse feature. I cannot say this enough, and I don't know how else I could be clear on this. Non-recourse simply means regardless of the duration for which the credit line is in place and growing, the FHA guarantees that the retiree will never have to pay back more than the value of the home. For many retirees, this guarantee, when combined with a growing line of credit, may be significant. You don't have to pay. You don't owe more than the home is worth. You just don't. It's just you don't. I don't know how else to say this. You don't. Your kids won't. Two specific aspects of reverse mortgage credit lines affect a quantitative analysis. They are amount available at the establishment of the reverse mortgage line of credit and the cost of the reverse mortgage credit line. The amount of credit line initially available is a function of the age of the borrower at the establishment of the credit line and the prevailing interest rate. In this analysis, the borrower was assumed to be 65 years old. The prevailing expected rate at the time of this writing, May 2017, meant that the amount initially available was approximately 54% of the home value. The Monte Carlo simulation program determined the amount available at later ages for the spreadsheets. We'll talk about that here. Other than approximately $125 for mandatory counseling session, there are no out-of-pocket costs for establishing or maintaining a reverse mortgage line of credit. The costs for establishing a reverse mortgage itself are included in three parts, all of which become part of the debt. These amounts can be negotiated with the lender to be brought down from a high of approximately $12,000 to near zero in exchange for higher ongoing interest rates. Right there, in exchange for higher ongoing interest rates. The calculations in this analysis use fees of $7,500, comprised of the $3,000 for the mortgage insurance premium, as what HUD makes you pay, plus $3,000 origination fee. Calculated as the averages of the figure on the Mortgage Professor website. Never heard that. Plus $1,500 in closing costs. So total $7,500 in closing costs. $3,000 for the mortgage premium is what you have to pay for HUD. $3,000 origination fee to the bank, and $1,500 in closing costs. So that's going to be $7,500. Let me pause for just a second. The analysis. The analytical technique used here is similar to that used by Sachs & Sachs in 2012. All right. A spreadsheet model using the following input parameters: initial value of the retirement savings portfolio, initial value of the retiree's home, and the initial withdrawal rate. The model used two worksheets run simultaneously. The two worksheets were identical in all aspects, including investment performance, inflation, and the amount drawn by the retiree, except for the strategy used to determine whether retirement income was drawn from the portfolio or the reverse mortgage line of credit was used. On each worksheet, the calculations of investment gain or loss and of retirement income withdrawal were performed for each a 30-year time frame. The investment gain or loss was determined stochastically, as was the inflation adjustment to the withdrawal amount. The 30-year calculation was repeated 10,000 times. In a certain number of those repetitions, the cash flow survived for 30 years, and in other repetitions, it did not. The three most significant determinants for cash flow survivor are the initial withdrawal rate, the sequence of investment returns, and the strategy for dealing with negative returns. Remember, the three most important things: how much you're starting to take out, the sequence of investment terms, and when you have negative returns, what do you do with it? In each of these 10,000 repetitions, the initial withdrawal rate was the same and the average investment return was the same, but the sequence of investment returns being randomly selected was not the same in each. A simple count was made of cash flow survival over 10,000 trials. The percentage of repetitions in the cash flow survived was termed cash flow survival probability. The primary, so let's see. The assumed portfolio, 60% equities, 40% bonds. So 6% equity, of which 40% with the S&P 500, 10% with small cap, and 10% international. 40% bonds, which is 10% in government bond index, 15% intermediate government bond index, and 15% in one-year treasury bonds. Let's see here. And it's rebalanced every year. As indicated previously, the primary financial objective of many retirees, especially those in house-rich categories, was assumed for the analysis to be inflation-adjusted cash flow that could survive for 30 years. The model for the analysis was that in the first year of retirement, a certain amount of was withdrawn, and each subsequent year's withdrawal was equal to the previous year's withdrawal, adjusted only for inflation, going back to 4% the initial time. They were going to adjust at 3% for inflation each year thereafter. Thus, the annual withdrawals provided constant purchasing power throughout retirement. Following the well-established convention, the initial withdrawal rate was expressed as a percentage of the initial portfolio value. All right, so strategy number one, establish a reverse mortgage line of credit at the outset of retirement. At the beginning of the first year of retirement, the first year's draw is taken from the portfolio. The amount of the draw is equal to 1/30 of the total retirement income resources, or 1 over 34 if conservative projections of investment returns are used. At the end of each year, the investment performance of the portfolio during that year is determined. If the performance was positive, the ensuing year's income is withdrawn from the portfolio. If the portfolio was negative, the ensuing year was drawn from the reverse mortgage line of credit. This is called a coordinated strategy. So markets are up, we're taking our next year's income from the markets. Markets are down, we're taking our next year's income from the reverse mortgage line of credit. Strategy 2. From the outset of retirement, withdraw retirement income only from the portfolio. Do not establish a reverse mortgage line of credit unless and until the portfolio is depleted. And after that point, the only source of retirement income is the credit line. That is the last resort strategy as established before. We're saying, hey, I'll do a reverse mortgage line of credit, but only when I have run out of money. Figure 1 and 2 demonstrate the dramatic increase of cash flow survival probability strategy of the first over number 2. And this is nuts. So you won't be able to see this on the podcast, but look, comparison of cash flow survival probability strategies for 2 retirees with equal treatment. So retiree number 1, mass affluent, and they had $400,000 in home equity and $800,000 in home retirement accounts. And here is strategy 1. They had a 90% probability rate. Again, we're taking 5% initially out of the portfolio. So we had $800,000 in the portfolio, which is $40,000 a year. We're adjusting with inflation. All right, so doing that, an initial portfolio value of $800,000, 5% initial withdrawal rate, and $40,000 was a 1 over 30. So what's going on here is we're saying we need $40,000 today and $40,000 adjusted each and every year thereafter. If the portfolio goes down in value the previous year, we take that equivalent of $40,000 from the home equity line of credit. If the portfolio goes up the previous year, we take that $40,000 equivalent from the portfolio. And it has a 90% success rate. Strategy 2, we just established in the home equity line of credit, the reverse mortgage line of credit as a last resort only had like a 76% success rate. A retiree 2 is house rich, investment poor. In this case, we got $800,000 of equity and only $400,000 in portfolio. So in this case, the initial portfolio value, in this case, we're taking 30. What are we taking here? 8.6% initial withdrawal rate of So what are you taking here? We're taking $34,500 from the portfolio of the initial. And we're going to take it again from which, in this case, we have 2 things going on. If the portfolio, strategy number 1, same thing. The portfolio does well, we take the money from there. Strategy number 1, the portfolio does poorly, we take it from the home equity line of credit. Strategy number 2, the portfolio does well or bad, we take it from there until it's exhausted, then we tap into the home equity. And what you'll see here is that there's only a 28% or so likelihood of survival by taking $34,000 a year from the portfolio on a $400,000 initial portfolio value. Hope that makes sense. But again, the survival rate just drops off a cliff because we're going to run out of money. No other way around that, because you only have $400,000 in there and you're taking $34,000 out, which again is 1 over 30. So that's the same amount right there. Now it will be a little bit less tax, but because you're not taking as much out, but still. All right, so now we got the cash flow for almost affluent. So in this case, we got survival rate for the people who establish a home equity line of credit. And again, they have $300,000 in retirement assets and $150,000 in equity, and they're taking 1 over 30. So again, that is a 15% distribution, because that's our total equity. Our total net worth is $450,000. We're taking 1 over 30 of that $450,000, or $15,000 a year. And the same strategy. So strategy number 1, we're establishing the home equity line of credit on the front end and using it when the markets go down. And the same exact thing happens on the second. If you have a house, house rich, almost affluent retiree with $300,000 home value and $150,000 in the portfolio, the person who uses a home equity line of credit as a last resort is in a world of hurt. No other way around that. Key findings: broad range of retirees, an effective coordinated approach to drawing upon retirement income resources can be used across a broad range of retirees, both in terms of the total retirement income and in terms of the ratio of their home value to the initial value of the retirement savings. And they just go through a bunch of different things here, and I'm not going to read it too much to you, but basically what we're saying is 4 different retirees, again, $400,000 in portfolio, $800,000 in house, and $1.2 million is the total net worth, and switch them around. how much they can take under the rule of 4%. So if you have $400,000 in your portfolio and $800,000 in your home, you can take $16,000 from your portfolio. If you use it as a 1/30 rule, you can take $34,500 from your portfolio, which essentially gives you the 8.6% distribution rate relative to your portfolio because you're tapping in your home equity line of credit, your home equity reverse mortgage. So instead of taking $16,000, we're just doing the 4% rule. We're taking more than twice that because we're tapping into our home equity, which gives us a drawdown as a percentage of our total portfolio of 8.6%. But it's still only 1/30. So I don't even know what, I don't have my calculator. I don't even know what that is, but it's still much, much higher than what we do if we just did a 4%. And so we basically have 34,500 compared to 16,000, and we still have a 9% success rate. Let's see. For any given amount of total retirement income resources, the dollar amount of an initial withdrawal was constant regardless of the ratio to retirement savings. The dollar amount of the initial withdrawal that resulted in approximately 90% probability of cash flow survival was the same as a broad range of ratios of home value to initial value. The dollar amount was determined as a fraction of the retiree's total retirement income sources. This finding resulted when the coordinated strategy was used for withdrawals, but not when the last resort. Again, last resort is I'm only going to tap into my home equity when I run out of money. They do a bunch of different other combinations here. We're saying, hey, your initial, let's see here. This is for the people who are mass affluent, where they have, or almost affluent, I should say, initial portfolio value of $175,000. You got home value of $275. Ratio of home value to portfolio is 1.57. Your initial distribution rate relative to your portfolio is 8.57 because you're taking out $15,000 a year if you use a 1/30 rule. So again, if you're taking 4% out on, you have a portfolio of $200,000, you're taking $8,000 a year. If you're taking 4% out, if you're taking 1/30 and you're throwing in your home value, you're taking, in this case, over $15,000 a year, and yet you still have a 90% chance of your money your assets outliving you. It's crazy. Now, if you're looking at ratio of home value to portfolio, in this case, we got a portfolio value of 275 and a home value of 175. You're going to take less out as initial distribution rate from your portfolio because you have more of a portfolio. It's just that simple. But if the majority of retirees have no debt on their home and they don't have that much saved, why would they not use their home equity as a source of income? I'm just showing you right now, if your portfolio value is 175 and you're 65 years old today, and you have a home value of 275, and you're going to go to a guy and say, how much can I take? He says 4% a year. That's not going to be that much. That's going to be less. That's going to be about $7,500. Whereas if you look at everything in its entirety, you could take out $15,000 and still have a 90% success rate of not run out of money. Now, we can change the numbers on the investment scenarios, and they're just looking at historical ones. And Blanchett talks about other observations. If you have a lower projected returns on your investments, it still is going to benefit their home equity reverse mortgage. It's just no getting around that. Computations using the rule of 30 and those using the rule of 34 both resulted in dollar amounts for retirees number 2 and 4. Again, that's the folks who have more equity and less retirement portfolios that were more than twice the amounts resulting from the safe withdrawal rate applicable when only securities withdrawn upon. Even the retirees in number 1 and 3 who had more portfolio than home equity, the rule of 30 and the rule of 34 both resulted in higher cash withdrawal rates that were more than 25% of the amounts that could be safely withdrawn just from the portfolio. In dollar terms and in percentage of income terms, these results are significant. For example, number 4, who retirees with a 401k valued at $150,000 is likely to have Social Security as his or her primary source of retirement income. Assume that Social Security is $25,000. Using strategy number 1, again, that's the strategy where you establish the home equity line of credit on the front end and use it when the markets go down. An initial withdrawal rate of 10% of the retirement account annually adjusted for inflation provided a 29% greater total cash flow throughout the 30-year retirement. All right, that's where I'm going to stop there. Lots more in here, and I'll let you read this. But I cannot stress this enough. This is a wonderful paper. I just, for the life of me, more and more people are going to retirement with not as much assets as they like for a myriad bunch of reasons. But a lot of people still have home equity. And to only use 4% as your home, as a withdrawal and not consider your home, I just find it to be, I don't think that's right. I think you should look at your home equity. Absolutely. Now, obviously, you're going to pay fees on the front end. I don't deny that. You're going to leave a debt most likely to your kids, and they'll have to sell the home or they'll have to pay off the debt if they want to retain the home. But how many kids actually want to retain their homes? I mean, I don't think that many. That might be different for your kids. But it is a non-recourse debt, which means you will never owe more than what the line of credit is, or what the home value is. Never, ever, ever. That's the nice thing about it. And that's the $3,000 on the front end of the fees, is that that you're paying that. So the HUD can make sure that if there is a fall in the market, that the FHA can make up the difference, but you don't have to. All right, so I'll put this in the show notes. This is number 3. I hope you like this. As always, smash, share, and subscribe and comment. We'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.